Blue Lock Rivals is going down a path that is starting to make the game worse and worse with each update and decision. So today, we'll be exploring a game you guys call the best Blue Lock game on Roblox, Azure Latch. Subscribe to become OP. Exhibit A, Azure Latch versus Blue Lock Rivals. Well, let's begin with the most obvious difference between the two games, the color saturation. Blue Lock Rivals is like sherbet ice cream, colorful and sweet, but can leave you feeling sick if you eat too much after a while. And Azure Latch is like cookies and cream, smooth, mellow, and chill. That doesn't stop Azure Latch from being what we film nerds like to call things cinema. This game truly makes you feel like you are in Blue Lock. Every goal has impact. Every movement has speed. When you get the ball, you can feel the adrenaline rush through your veins as you are crossing the field. And yes, in my opinion, I believe Azure Latch has the best movement in all of Roblox Blue Lock games. The reason I say this is because it borrows some of the best aspects from movement from Battlegrounds games. It also probably helps since this game was also created by the people who made Fiction Battlegrounds, which had decent movement that I think honestly fits better in a Blue Lock game though. You have a side dash, a front dash. The stills work properly in this game instead of using broken hitboxes for stills like in Blue Lock Rivals. The game is also extremely fast paced. Like, I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it here. This game sometimes feels a little too fast paced. In 1 second you could have the ball and then immediately you get it stolen if you aren't paying attention. As soon as I get the ball, it's gone. This game requires you to literally be locked in at all times, or you will turn over the ball to the other team if you aren't careful. I messed up. And to be honest, I feel as if this game is really not beginner friendly either, but that's what makes it rewarding. In Blue Lock Rivals, it almost feels as if you're good from the start, but that's also why the game has so many players, because it's simple and easy for anyone to pick up and play, whereas in Azure Latch, you will get stomped out for a couple games before you even score your first goal. But something as simple as the excitement and feeling of getting said first goal is immaculate. Oh, shot! Let's go! Let's go! My first goal! That felt good! And getting those first MVPs. Well, let's just say I was a bit too hyped for that. Did I get it again? Let's go! But don't get it twisted. Your teammates in this game are just as egotistical as in Blue Lock Rivals. Whoever is midfield will be scoring majority of the goals depending on how good they are. Goals in Blue Lock Rivals are as simple as click a button to win the game. But in Azure Latch, it still can be that, but you have to think a little bit more about where you're aiming your shot in order to score. Even your awakening shots tend to miss if you aren't carefully aiming. Now to the main change that Azure Latch has, and that's the fact that the game gives you about 5 moves to use in your toolbar. Granted, 2 of them usually are your awakening moves and 3 of them are usually your base moves. Now these moves can be a dribble counter where someone has to use a still on you whilst the counter is playing and it gives you this super dope animation. Or you of course have a steal ability either in flow or base depending on the character. Then you have your defensive abilities or movesets like Don Lorenzo, which was really fun. As GK you have your special abilities too, but again in this game GK kind of feels like an afterthought and you have to really be good to block shots. But another thing I really love about Azure Latch is that it isn't a pain to get any of the abilities in the game because essentially the spin system is a gift from God. You not only get tons of cash from codes, but you get to keep whatever style you roll for without paying anything in Robux for any type of storage. Now you just straight up get it. You can also spam the hell out of the spin button, which is a good quality of life feature of Azure Latch, and I quickly got whatever style I wanted. I only don't have like 2 of the rarest ones because I just stopped spinning, which is fine because the lower rarities in the game are balanced to be useful against the rarest stuff in the game, and sometimes the lower rarities are actually better than the higher rarities in the game, which is amazing, unlike in Blue Lock Rivals where the power creep is so strong that nearly every new ability is more broken than the last, causing you to practically be at a disadvantage anytime you're using an older or just flat out worse rarity. Nail Rin is probably the biggest crime known to man out of any of the newer rarities that came out when Crollo was trying to sabotage the game during his run as owner, and it's not really that much better now that Do Big has a huge share in Blue Lock Rivals. Blue Lock Rivals has turned into a mess. It has gotten a bit better, but the power creep is still prevalent. But the rarity system in Azure Latch is so much more respectable because it makes you realize that this game was made for the love of the Blue Lock anime, instead of trying to make the most cash grabby game possible. Now onto the animations of this game compared to other Blue Lock games. While Azure Latch has the best awakening and ultimate move animations out of any Blue Lock game bar none. They even have special ones that only occur when you are in overtime, like Isagi's overtime shot of course, or the battle between Rin and Sai from the manga, which is an incredible attention to detail and makes this game feel like the definitive Blue Lock game on Roblox. Blue Lock Rivals of course has its own pretty animations, but they feel a step lower compared to Azure Latch, and instead of focusing on the animation being smooth, they more so focus on the flashing VFX and colorful saturated colors that literally blind you while you're playing. Like, bro, this is absolutely horrible, which is fine if that's what you're into, but doesn't hit the same anymore after playing Azure Latch. I'm sorry, it's the true fact. In Azure Latch, you have to actually earn this awakening, which makes it much more rewarding when you finally get it. Now, Blue Lock games still kind of have that problem of being cutscene simulators. Once you kind of get tired of seeing those animations, because it slows the game down to a crawl and makes everyone watch as the scene plays out, they're dope, but I just kind of wish there was a way you could turn these off, especially for Blue Lock Rivals. The one thing that does heavily affect the gameplay of both games, but especially Azure Latch, is lag. It's almost unplayable if you are not in a good server or just have laggy internet. It's kind of bearable in Blue Lock Rivals since the game isn't as fast paced and it's a lot more simple to score. Also, mobile players unfortunately get the short end of the stick in Azure Latch since it's a whole lot harder to play on there as opposed to Blue Lock Rivals, which makes it much more simple for mobile players to play. Overall, do I think Blue Lock Rivals is worse than Azure Latch? Yes. But do I understand why more people play Blue Lock Rivals over Azure Latch? Also, yes. Exhibit B, the problems with Azure Latch. As with any game on Roblox or any game in general, they are not perfect without flaws. Azure Latch, don't get me wrong, is pretty much the best Blue Lock game out right now. But there's a reason why Blue Lock Rivals is about 20 times more popular than it. Many people complain about Azure Latch being too hard, but instead of countering that with blah 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 skill issue, I replace showering with Azure Latch. Maybe let's analyze why people consider Azure Latch a difficult game to grasp in the first place. Well, it's quite simple. The game has a lot of different mechanisms you need to grasp in order to become a good striker. You need to know when to use your dribble and when to slice without wasting everything in one motion. There is also tons of abilities in the game, so figuring out which ones do what and how to use them properly sometimes is too overwhelming for most players. I have a solution. I think a tutorial for Azure Latch would ultimately make the game a lot more playable for people who can't quite grasp the game within their first few public matches, where you get thrown to the wolves. A soccer game with a really good tutorial is Remat, and I think Azure Latch should really take tips from that game when adding this tutorial. Also, so many mobile players complain about their experience, and they are a huge part of Blue Lock Rivals player base, or just the player base of Roblox in general. Like, majority of you guys are on mobile. Zipping them from a good experience does way more harm than good, so a revamp to mobile controls and gameplay will probably help Azure Latch in the long run. Despite me saying Azure Latch has way better balancing than Blue Lock Rivals, this still does not mean Azure Latch has absolutely perfect balancing and there's no unbalance in the game. Without an IQ or a human GK, Baru in Azure Latch is practically unguardable, unless the person using Baru, aka me, isn't that good at the game yet. IQ's reflex tackle is such a fundamental part to any team that without that on your team, you are at a sudden disadvantage almost immediately against Baru. So more styles with defensive abilities that are as good as IQ's reflex tackle will go a long way towards tackling this problem. Still a lot more balanced than whatever Blue Lock Rivals has going on. And lastly, the number one issue I think most players complain about is the pacing of Azure Latch being too fast. This is just the unfortunate byproduct of the game having good movement. This still also causes you to fly backwards, making it hard but not impossible for you to catch up to whoever stole it from you. This causes an instant punish for bad offense, which I personally like, but I can understand why a lot of people trying out this game for the first time don't like this level of pacing, because it can be a pain when you first start out and have no idea what a header and how to get in front of the other team. Again, a tutorial would fix this, but I rest my case. Exhibit C, will Azure Latch survive Goalbound? Well, now we must talk about the elephant in the room, Goalbound. The absolute behemoth amount of hype this game has will absolutely shake up the scene of Blue Lock games on Roblox. I was granted the opportunity to test the game, and yeah, you guys should be excited for it because it will be a game that I think will appeal to both Azure Latch and Blue Lock Rivals players. It is colorful like Blue Lock Rivals and has mechanics that are on par or in some cases better than Azure Latch. like the air dash mechanic that allows you to play defense like a demon if you're good at using it. Overall, I think Azure Latch continues to maintain its balancing. It will be alright, but I do think Goldbound is edging out Azure Latch just slightly in animation quality.
That's a clip.
That's a clip. That's a clip. That's what we do.
Both games are super fun though, and I can't wait to see how they compete when Goldbound eventually releases this summer. But as I said in every video, if you guys enjoyed the video and like some more content like this one, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next video. Peace.